Are we going to draw?
Yeah, so I shared in the chat a link to Miro where we are going to explore during the first activity an interesting topic of thinking how we can actually draw the present. And I think this question, what is making sense, perhaps could be the beginning. So for those that are unfamiliar, the way we are going to work here is with basic elements. So everyone would be assigned either a line, a circle, and a dot. So we have those three components, and then we just try to visually express our ideas using the elements. Diana, do you want to show how we do that?
Okay, so I can do actually a screen share, so it's easier for me to explain how that works in Miro. Okay, so we're in Miro. Can everyone see it?
Yeah.
Okay, so we've got, so basically what it means to be a line, it means you'll have to do straight angles. So if you have a line, you'll have to like play around with it. You can change the color if you feel you want to have a unique style. You can even like play with the features here, like make it dotted, make it bigger, just to get as close as you want to your creative thought. But if you are a circle, it means you can also use curves. So you can create curvy lines to just help you express better certain thoughts and where they kind of go around. We also have the shapes, so the square people, you know, those who can use lines and straight angles are allowed to use rectangles, these things. And on the other side, you know, we've got the rounds, and you can do the same thing, again, change colors and play around. With the dot people, they have two choices. They can either use a circle and fill it, and then, you know, they have something like this, and then they can like play around. Just, for example, you can use Control D, and you duplicate your form, and you can put them in whatever shape. So as long as they look kind of like dots. But if you feel like you're a bit of a freestyle person, you can go to pen and select a marker tip, and then you can begin to just click on the page, and all of a sudden you've got dots. That's what I like to do. So this is kind of how it works. We have two ways of doing this. We can either take turns, and, you know, so a person does something and then it explains to the others what they had in mind when they did it, and then, you know, we listen, and then it goes to the other person. But if the conversation feels it's got a different tone or a special flow, we can just draw together and connect visually on this side, and also talk on the formal grounds, and, you know, have almost two different conversations in a way. But yeah,
one that is kind of like a visual, and the other one of the words we choose to share our ideas. I think we are small groups, so perhaps we can do the simultaneous one, so that people get stimulated to and prompted to express their ideas visually, and then whoever feels like sharing, you guys can share. So let's distribute the elements.
Well, I would like to be a circle. I want to do curves.
Okay, so Jonathan, do you mind being a line? Kevin, do you also want to be a circle? And Vinish, you can be a line, and I'll be a dot.
I'm not too sure, to be honest. I'm not good in drawing. Okay, I'll try out with whatever I get.
Yes, none of us is Picasso, so you will see. It doesn't really require
we will
anything.
be together.
only like at least if you have an idea and you're willing to visually put it with the element, that's good enough, and that's what we're looking forward.
Yes. Okay, I'll do that.
Okay, so we wanted to. I think we can start from this question that we've been just brainstorming around. What is sense, and how can we capture sense so that we can draw what's going on in our current present? Who wants to start? Diana, do you have an idea?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I don't have an idea. I just have another question. It's like sense as in presence, like a little pun here. Thinking about there's some sort of resonance with these terms. I feel like there's an overlap that they kind of, I don't know, it's like an echo when we think about present and sensing and sense making. There's something that these terms have in common. And what made me think about it is this, adjusting versus adapting. It's how we position ourselves in terms of how we want to do things, how we want to relate to the world. And if you want to adjust to things, you kind of have to adjust your lens, like you adjust your perspective. But when you adapt, you have to kind of do it in action. So what are we actually doing when we think about the present? Do we adjust our perspective, or do we constantly adapt and make all the necessary requirements in the physical world or something like that? I don't know. What do you guys think?
Just before we continue, I think Vinish had a question about
what tool I can use? Can you just give me a quick recap on that?
So you align, and the line is situated on the left where you see this.
I see.
What is this called? An arrow. And if you click under the arrow, there is line, and then you just pick, and that's all you have to do.
Perfect.
Pick the line and shape it the way you feel like. So I will remove my thing. And if you feel like you have an interesting idea that others would benefit, then just shout out and share what you are drawing and how does sensing the present looks like to you.
Got it. Thanks.
Yeah, I like the fact that you mentioned this idea of echo, Diana. In a way, I think in a way we have to let it go through us, and we create connections with whatever we have in mind right now, and other ideas or past discussions. I like the fact that we need the past to think about the present, because without those experiences we had in the past that shape our thinking, we could not actually resonate, as you mentioned, with the present and find a useful meaning to it. I don't know, something like that. This is what I have in mind when you're discussing about echo and resonance.
I'm actually thinking, where am I situated within this wavelength or the echo? So I've been drawing these dots here and there, trying to turn them into a shape. Not that they're of any shape, but in this big world, it's sometimes feels hard to know where do you belong before you can make any sense, because usually sense is somehow, at least to me personally, I associate it with being grounded and having certain weight and a footprint in the context or in the situation. So when that gravity or weight is missing, then things are very floating, like dispersed dots everywhere. I don't know, something like that.
Diana, could you just explain again how you differentiate adapting and adjusting? Because there's something I think very interesting, but I'm not sure I understood exactly what you were meaning.
I'm not sure myself if I'm making the right difference between the two, but I thought that adjusting is closer to adjusting a lens to see better, whether adapting is more about transforming yourself to be able to cope with that reality, that ever-changing reality. So, yeah, to me, adjusting didn't require a transformation to the core, but it required something more like shifting a perspective, not necessarily going, like impersonating it. I can just shift a perspective every day just for the sake of seeing new things. But if I am to adapt, it means I will have to do a lot more work and become that perspective. And if I have to keep on adapting, I think it would be, a lot of work.
Adapting would be changing your kind of belief system or your I'm actually looking at your book. I wanted to write an email to you, and you use the word frame. So is that how you would see this idea of adapting would be changing frame, whereas adjusting might be within a certain frame to clarify your vision? As I like the idea of adjusting your vision through a microscope or something. Would that be what you were thinking about?
Yeah, I think that would be a fair explanation. Why not? What do you think? Do you have something else in mind?
No, I don't. I was just I thought that sounds interesting, and I wasn't sure I understood it very well, so that's why I was asking. But I think it's a fair point. I think definitely. Yeah, there's degrees. I mean, in machine learning, for example, there's two levels at which you can, the machine learns. So what does it learn? It changes some parameters as it, analyzes images or stuff like this. It's changing its internal function and how it classifies things, etc. So for me, that's kind of adjustment. But there are multiple different kinds of models you can use. So you can change the number of parameters, you can change the structure of the network you're using for doing these operations. And these are kind of more meta level changes. And people research this. So only human beings can do the meta level changes in the model. But the machine, what it learns is within a given model, it'll adapt to whatever task it is you're giving to it and what you're feeding it. So that, I think, makes sense to me, yeah.
Kevin, how are you feeling? Does it make sense?
I don't know. I'm. That's not quite clear in my mind right now. But I guess it is part of this process we were discussing, right? Yeah. Yeah, I don't know if anyone else.
Present or presence, either way. What do you guys feel like is the stable component that has a lot of mass that you can wrap your heads around? Is there such thing?
I'm sorry, can you just repeat the question? What is the?
I was asking, what do you feel like it is clear through the mere sense of gravity and volume around in the, if we think about sensing the present, which aspects are to you personally quite intuitive and therefore you can sense it easily?
I'm sorry, but I'm still not sure I understand your question. Can you? What of?
In the present, so we are talking about sensing the present, and in this present, some things are clear to us, and certain things are difficult to wrap our head around. For example, for me personally, it is clear what is remote work. It wasn't, to be honest, before. I had a different association to that, but right now I think I'm quite clear of the implications if this trend continues going forward, how to think of it and what to expect. So if you have to answer this question in the present moment, what is clear to you, what would that be?
The question of drawing the present, of sensing the present, you mean?
Yeah.
In the present. Yes. Okay. I see. It's like in the present, the question of sensing the present. Okay.
Yeah. And where is the clarity? Which component is like?
Well, I mean, I think it goes back a bit to the question of what does it mean sensing the present in a way. For me, I find it's a very difficult question because it goes very deep into the kind of metaphysical questions, it seems to me. Even, does an objective reality exist? And then how do we, and then is it accessible if it does? I mean, these are, I think, age-old questions. Mm-hmm. I'm a scientist, or at least I studied science, so I have quite an empirical approach myself. Is okay, if you take your pen and drop it, well, you have an expectation in the present moment that the pen's going to fall down. And we were talking about gravity, so you drop the pen and it falls down. And so we've created laws to describe this. Newton created his laws with the gravity and all this. But I mean, we have no proof that you could not take a pen and suddenly you let go of it and it turns into a butterfly or something, crazy like this. There's no actual proof that this could not happen. We just have an empirical evidence that our patterns of what we see just has never happened. And it's not only that stuff hasn't happened, it's that the same kinds of things happen a lot, and so much so that you can actually create laws that will predict how things will work. But there's never any certainty in what is possible or what is even the reality, it seems to me. So I base myself on, and that's why I'm not sure. I mean, this notion of the present and the past, I mean, I think, if you're living completely in the present, then there's no time, there's nothing. I mean, the past is obviously included in any conscious appreciation of the present moment. I think, okay, you talk about meditation, etc. But even to be able to do meditation, then, you have decided to do it at some point. And, a rock can't do meditation, in my opinion. Now, other people might have other opinions. But, so, everything we know and see about the world comes from our past and the models we've made. Okay, some people make models with maths, with gravity and stuff like this, but we all have models, in my opinion, of how things work. implicit or explicit. And these models in the present shape how we will behave. But I know not everyone is necessarily in agreement with this, I don't think.
Yeah. On my side, what I feel is kind of what I see as structural today and clear is some form of, sometimes conflicting narratives, in general, like about what we should do about the climate and energy, and what we should do as a society about social injustice or stuff like that. And what is weird, the relationship I have with that is at the same time that it is clear how the narrative is framed and how the narrative aims at a form of action, I'm in discomfort with this clarity, which I find is sometimes too clear for something that is not only the present but also the future. I'm not sure if I'm clear with that, but for me, what we frame today in the present is the wish and of what should be the future in some way. And what I find is interesting is where you are in the middle of those narratives, and that you find that you have some kind of tensions between the narratives that are interesting. But I'm not able today to pick a side and say, okay, this is what we should do. Absolutely. Yeah, and my feeling of the sensing the present is this. But this has to do with my general way of approaching knowledge. Is I'm a skeptic, and for that I'm not able to always have a clear answer to the thing. I'm just saying, well, we don't know, so we have to try things and see how it goes. But yeah, and with other form of narrative, I disagree with them, but I find it useful that they exist in the same space, so because they push forward the other narratives, like about systemic injustice. I understand the concept. I agree with the observation, but I disagree with the prescription. So yeah, but I find it useful that it exists, and I find it useful that it push forward the thinking about it. So yeah, this is kind of the structure I see, is like around whatever formalities that the society has created. We have those narratives that emerges and change and shapes and stuff like that. And yeah, and again, I find them useful, and at the same time, it's hard to say, okay, this should be like this, and we agree with all of this narrative. But I don't know if I'm clear. I can be more precise examples, but I don't know if it would be useful.
I think there's a danger to I agree with what you're saying about they do spot on the right kind of issues, but the way they prescribe the solution of how should things be like is just, I don't know, it's very disconnected, to say the least. But I think the issue here is trying to formalize aspects of our lives that have such significance for us. Like, the present moment itself, now it can be formalized as an app for meditation. And the present moment is about this and that, and it's about love and all of these concepts that tie together, which is nothing wrong with it. But the problem is trying to communicate it via shallow waters. It has significance as long as you're in it and you're doing it yourself. It's a first-hand experience. And I think, there are issues that need to be formalized in order to make sure we catch people kind of abusing their power. Things like freedom, diversity, they need some sort of formalization. But I think the one we got in place now, it's based on the same kind of structure control is based on. So you're talking about, let's have a more diverse culture. And we're all about giving everyone the freedom to talk about their personal matters at work, or you create a culture of inviting learning and things like that. But this is not going to work if you don't understand the people that work for you and what they're actually looking for. It's not enforcing something that's allegedly positive and accepted by everyone into a formal institutionalized practice. Is like learning is the death, education is the death of learning, pretty much. So, and I think that happens, even here we're looking at our drawing and I can see that there's so much power to it. There's so much going on. It doesn't really make any sense because the present has so many forces at play. I see the arrows pointing towards the center, that circle, as somehow constraining, making the present smaller as there's more adversity in the world. There's so much going on and you have to keep on doing things to just stay afloat. But on the other hand, there are things emerging out, the arrows pointing at the environment, showing that in a way you can stay connected and have enough space for yourself. The pandemic gave us the chance to reflect a little, to pause, also to panic, but you could also pause and reflect. And you got these two choices, and every present moment you're confronted with making the choice of either make sense of the environment or make sense of your experience. And I think these two are very powerful because it really determines the kind of life you'll be leading and whether you can see the nuances. I like your grey clouds. Will they start raining soon? So I'm curious what Vinish says. What do you think?
Yes.
Well, so I mean, this conversation itself has influenced what I was originally thinking. To be honest, I have not studied design or systems or anything, so all my thoughts and comments are derived from my work experience. Okay. How I think about making sense of the present is has a lot to do about the organizations or teams or humans' willingness to learn and being open to be challenged. So that's one of the constraints that I have noticed so often in last few years, that when we look at something now or for tomorrow, we are not always too keen to identify the patterns for why we are where we are today. So, for instance, if there has been a backstory that make us a success or a failure now, so then in the present we are not always too keen to have a modular approach to reverse engineer and process what made us a success or failure now. Okay, so that is essentially about the resistance to change or the apprehension to unlearn what did not click us for me as an individual or me as an organization or an entity, and that really impacts uh, what could make sense for me today or in present. Okay. So the way I look at it, as I try to draw a shape also, that there are lots of hidden stories and backstories that can give us really good food for thought for um, our decision models today and tomorrow, but we do not try to make sense of those patterns that has shaped us present so far. So the couple of what should I say, troughs that I try to draw meant that we keep these hidden below the surface, not by intent always. It's part human behavior, part organization culture, and part so many factors. But it's also true that there is a natural resistance to the let go of what is not working for us by rightly identifying it. It's a lot more than what the KPIs and metrics show. It's about our approach, our thought process, our mental models, and our decision models that make our work. So that's how I look at the present. Making sense of present is essentially derived from how we make a collective sense of our immediate past decisions or a pattern of a series of decisions that has shaped us present today. Does it answer the question?
Yes, I think it does, and I think you captured it really beautifully when you said that a lot is actually hidden under the surface. Even if we are in the present, we cannot escape those previous structures. And I really liked how you put that this is linked to the biases or our unwillingness to unlearn. So when I was looking at the drawing, I also see a lot of white space, even though we've been busy trying to fill it up. But to me, this actually, the white space is what gives me hope that we would be able to somehow still find ourselves in the midst of all of this change and everything that is going on. To process and understand, I hope, better the experiences that are shaping us.
Yeah, I would like to add a quick comment on top of that. I think it has also a lot to do with the incentives. Incentives for organizations and teams and individuals. And these are grossly mismatched in my understanding, whether in public sector or private sector. Um, Establishing some standards for how somebody, an individual or a corporation, sees those incentives has a lot to do with their resistance to change or resistance to unlearning and that learning cycle. Okay, so as long as we keep an even in civic tech, as far as I have observed by the writing or talks in some of the successful projects in the world, the incentives are either not clearly communicated, or sometimes misplaced because of the constraints that we tend to call these as obvious constraints, but these are not obvious. So there is an inherent tendency to uh, give or take some benefit of doubt of the constraints, because, as I said, because of the mismatch in incentives. Right. So, for instance, um, if if a system can see the right incentives, which doesn't mean too utopian or too idealistic, but right incentives to make little more sense of our present, then I think the people are little more resilient to fight these constraints. So there has to be some relation between the factors that give us some benefit of doubt, that we have some limitations and constraints by policymakers or technology or whatever variables these are beyond our control or within our control, and the incentives that make us take those decisions.
I think that's very nicely put. But I'm also kind of looking and trying to reflect of what I see here visually, and I see that somehow in the present there are those seeds that have the potential to be transformative for the future, because it is as much as about staying connected to the moment, but also making steps towards new opportunities, or at least that's how I interpret the black heavy lines at the bottom. It reminds me of this idea that we're trying to process the change and understand of how to really belong and find meaningful experiences, but at the same time we're also planting little seeds what would actually matter for the future. Perhaps it happens unconsciously, but I don't know. That's what came to mind when I saw those lines.
Yeah, but I think another funny or maybe ironic thing about this relationship we have to the present is that this doesn't look ideal. No matter how much we're trying to work on it, it's not gonna be our way. It's gonna be a way. And, there will be aspects of it that will be out of our control and definitely messy. And our cognitive capability will never present us a full picture of what the present is about, even though it's the one thing that we are closest to. So, for example, I was trying to think about the future, my future, and it's one of the most anxious, triggering kind of tasks I have in mind most of the time. So I got really overwhelmed thinking about how am I gonna do all this about the future, and I realized that that was going too far away from my body. So but what can I do now without feeling so terribly anxious? What do I have control of? And it was this present moment. It felt like in this moment I don't have to worry about the future because it doesn't exist. And there's one thing that I feel I am part of, which is the present. And I think having this maybe in the workplace, it's so valuable because sometimes we are dealing with very complex problems, and we are given incentives and we're given a lot of things. We're also motivated to keep on working on the problem, and there's roadblocks, and it comes with all these small things. But actually what's missing is just being able to pause and be within what you can handle, not always striving to deliver the results, is appreciating the fact that you can work together towards that, even though there isn't a clean, complete picture. So I would like to see that more in different workplaces, just to fasten to speed up the flow, and also to allow it to happen and unfold organically. Just like here.
Look at that.
Hello, Cameron.
Hi, Cameron. Look
Hi.
where we've been drawing without you. You've been missed.
Oops. Hi, everyone. My apologies for late. I'm having an enormous number of tech problems this morning.
We've been brainstorming around the idea of sensing the present, using the drawing as a tool to reflect on what is our relationship. And yeah, it's been messy with a lot of confusion, but also a lot of white spaces. And many things hidden in the underground, not necessarily obvious all the time, but with some seeds of change planted for the future, if I can summarize the high level of what this mess is about.
Something very funny struck me right now. But what if, we are always trying to make sense and have these really logical and relatable stories.
Yeah.
But what if, we can stretch it to a little higher ground where things don't really make sense, but they're fun to connect it like that. And I think the drawing does it. So as Karen told me that he had these technical problems, I just remembered my dream last night. And I remember how my modem, my internet modem was on fire, and there was like a hole in the wall, and I was like, I don't know what to do. I can't extinguish it because probably I'll make it worse if I pour water on a socket, that's charged. And that got me thinking. It's like, actually, these connections are very helpful. Drawing these connections where they aren't are always welcome. Even with the empty space, the fact that you can see the empty space gives you so much more freedom to experiment and think about everything you can do, more so than the things you haven't done. So your relationship to the emptiness is really defining and shaping your character, your attitude towards your work, and it can reflect in multiple levels.
I think Vinish is raising hand.
No, sorry, that wasn't asked. I forgot to lower it down.
Okay.
Sorry.
Yeah. It reflects to me this drawing reflects to me, the how to say that, the wickedness of the now, of the present. And you just said that you remember of your dream, but when you say that, it reminded me that yesterday I didn't want to sleep. I wanted to be, occupied. My brain be occupied. I didn't want to think about other stuff, because right now I'm going through some things that really take a lot of space in my brain right now, and I don't want to think about them anymore. And this happens to be what I want to do, every night for the last 2 or 3 weeks. And then when I see that, I see it. It shapes it takes, it has the form of it's funny because it has also a form of a virus, it's like the coronavirus in some way. It sounds like when I see
work
it,
is a virus, yes.
And I see that, it reminds me of, actually it shapes the now pretty well to me, in fact.
You mean the present is a virus that shapes now?
I don't know if I mean that, but it could mean that.
Well, you could, because a virus is actually entering our system and slowly shaping everything inside of us, so it's affecting us. The present may be in a way like that. It's just, it does something else to us. Maybe it's got a different...
work want to replicate in yourself, in you, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
That's what habits do, the type of habits you cultivate are actually chunks of consolidated presence that become past, because, you let them grow old. The virus is getting older instead of adapting. It's like it doesn't want to adapt anymore. It adjusts very slowly in your system, and kind of you get into this symbiosis where you're not able to grow out of it.
That's funny, because at some point I want it to create a variant of it that becomes useful to me, because right now it is not. But I want a mutation at some point of this virus in me that help me actually do something about it, because right now I feel like kind of stuck. And so this reflects to me a side, a part of my reality right now that I want to, in a way, escape, and I want to face it at the same time. This tension sometimes you have, and and that's it. So I'm talking about me, but it speaks to me this way. It's like, and I see also the fire somewhere.
Yes.
In the lower side, right hand side of the drawing is kind of like a forest in fire or something like that to me. And it has to be it has some truth to it, because to me it's kind of what highlights the summer. It was cold here, but everywhere else in Switzerland it was cold, and that's really a summer, but everywhere else it was on fire. So and in some way I want to be myself on fire to tackle the problems I have right now. So yeah, I don't know, it's like speaks to me at different levels, and this would be my interpretation of the of the drawing for myself, at least. Yeah.
Diana, I thought that way you described, there's something like the chunks of consolidated present, past manifest in the present. I thought was just very poetic. I know. I thought that was. I was like, yeah, that's a great that's a great way of doing that. And I think that, Kevin, you were just talking about the idea of the sort of weird thing, that feeling, that fire, and I think that it's what's so interesting is that when you have all this stuff going on, I speak as somebody who's been this drawing this morning, is that it's so much of what we attend to which shapes which part of what I find so interesting about these drawings is that they're speaking in some ways to a holistic big truth, where our attention may often be in one part of it at any given time. And that ability to zoom out and zoom back, I think, is really important, because what patterns we focus on in terms of our life, some of these are kind of whimsical, kind of, flowing things. There's symmetry here, in other areas. There's sort of patterns that you can clearly see here. There's a bunch of much higher degree of randomness in this area over here. And it's kind of a little bit of life. And yet, a bunch of these patterns, and yet some of them go together well visually and some of them don't. But that's part of the point, I think.
Yes.
Yeah, it's the paradox. It's the paradox that you're in the present, but then there is this consolidated past, but also the seeds of the future. So it's a madness.
Yeah.
In some way, you cannot think about the present without thinking about the future, and using the past for that. Yeah.
I can totally click with what Cameron said about, some places are visually appealing. They go nicely together, but in some cases they don't. And that fits so well with our lives. Like, you got certain habits that fit so well with everything you do. Maybe like your morning routine, it fits in with whatever you want to do for the day. But then, you have, maybe you're stuck, you're all the time stuck or frustrated because of your work. And then you start to let it out on your family and kids. And that doesn't fit well visually. So you could see that there's an aesthetic appeal to how these patterns come together, and I think that's really significant. If why do we say we have a beautiful life? Our life is beautiful if these patterns are going together well.
Yeah.
So,
What's interesting also to that point is that I also don't think that generally, and this is obviously an aesthetic choice or comment on my part, but is the idea that oftentimes things that have a lot of symmetry and balance, and are highly structured and linear, I often don't think of as beautiful. I might think of it as elegant or useful, but I often don't think it's beautiful. And I often think about the idea, like the wabi-sabi idea, the idea that it's the imperfections, it's the things that don't fit, or at least they make the other pieces uncomfortable. That to me is where beauty lies. Like the most beautiful things, if you think about the most beautiful, well, maybe examples of products might be a bit different, but organic things, which is what humans are, the most beautiful people or events or circumstances, at least in my recollection, are never these tightly scripted things. They're always these parts of the lines here, but they're not all chaotic. So I think it's almost as if it's got all of that together.
You should have been at the beginning when it was really kind of even difficult to kickstart this conversation on the topic, and I think we managed to confuse Vinish a lot with this method, because he's the one that he hasn't experienced it before. So, but the point of this, and why I also feel very attached to this, is the power of this unspoken things or unspoken truths that we don't really verbalize, but they are in us, and given the chance, they kind of come to life in a very unexpected or weird way. So I'm personally drawn to what Diana was doodling at was this bottom right corner. So Diana, what is that? It's like my eyes there. So, and the red line, by the way.
So I drew something that looks more like a fist. If you notice it, it wasn't meant to be a fist, but then I tried to make it a fist, like with the fingers, or like the nails sort of coming very cartoony together. But I don't know what I was doing there. It just got me thinking about. Now I'm
You're
thinking about
giving
this.
the present a punch.
Yeah.
Well, there's an emergence, that's the interesting thing about it. And like Cameron said about this imperfection, I think, if I go, even with the user experience, you go into a very beautifully designed website and you look at it, what you like is not the perfection, but also the imperfection. You look on Amazon, it's just so imperfectly made and filled with so much shit, but it gets you where you're supposed to be, because our minds are messy. They're looking for a very certain type of cognitive clarity, but that doesn't make it by the book clarity. And I think that's how this method also draws ideas, because of this. You keep on drawing and you have like these mirror neurons firing together. They're trying to mimic what they see, but at the same time they're thinking and they're trying to draw their own connections of what the experience is about. And then you get this learning capability quite firsthand. You don't know really what's going on, but I think the more we drew together, the more I saw the discomfort I get in my head. Like I'm trying to mimic something that makes no sense to me. I can't mimic those sketches, but I want to shape somehow what's going on in my head. And, at some point I get these interesting expressions, like consolidated present, which I've never thought of in my life.
Yeah.
But that's the beauty.
Diane, I don't know how many of you are familiar with Alan Watts and his work.
Oh yeah.
He talks a lot about sort of Eastern, a lot of kind of Buddhist sort of Zen kind of teachings and stuff. But I remember listening to one of his lectures. There's tons of them on the internet if you're ever interested in. And he was talking about something that is you know, the moment you hear it, you're like, oh yeah, of course. And he was talking about the fact is that, you know, we have how we substitute, like our words are vehicles for trying for completely inadequately, but they're just ways of expressing something like a feeling. Like a feeling isn't a word. It's not a sound. It's not text. It's something else, and yet we're trying to convey something like that. And what I love about this method is it reminds us that there's other ways to do that as well than just trying to explain. Like we try and explain a linear thing, and yet, you know, when you talk about what it's like building this, it's like it's kind of like this. It's not like this, but it brings some things out through the act of doing it. And I think what it does is, to me, it's always a reminder of there's these other ways that we can tap into things that don't have words. They don't have colors. They don't have and yet we use colors to represent them, but they're things, you know, they're different.
Yeah, just wanted to reply to Vinish. No worries, Vinish. Thanks for joining and stayed so long. Thank you very much. And I don't know if you can join later or it's really late, I think, on your side. So no worries. Thank you for coming.
Thanks, Finish. Yeah, hope you can stay later. That would be great.
Yeah, I'm sorry I didn't follow everything you said about what you were saying. Sorry, I missed a part of the story. I'm really sorry. I wanted just to reply to the thing I heard right before I had to open my door. Is that Diana, you were saying about, you know, clarity, and there's something to me that I prefer to use, a concept that I prefer to use than clarity, because I don't think it is clarity necessarily, but coherence, that I feel is more, you know, apt to reflect what we mean by gaining clarity, but it's not necessarily clear. It's you know, it's clear to a certain point. It's clear enough to do something, but there's still some uncertainty to it. Like navigating into Amazon, you don't expect everything that happens to you when you are doing that. You know, you are sometimes a bit inside to do some things and to watch some content or whatever, and it's coherent enough for you to you know, reach a point where you feel like you did what you have to do on this platform, but that's it, right? You don't stay on Amazon and just watching everything possible because you can, you know. That's not what you. Maybe it's your little thing, but yeah.
Yeah, that's the healthy attitude.
You know, it's like with other platforms, with Netflix, you know, or with it's coherent enough for you to find something interesting at some point, but that's it. You, yeah, or it's unbalanced where you live with those platforms. But yeah, coherence is yeah, I feel is a good way to frame it.
Yeah, that comes with the attitude you have. You either want an easy life or you want ease of mind. So if you're looking for clarity, always you might have a very hard life. But if you seek to have ease of mind, you will stay on the coherent plot and just enjoy whatever comes and expect, or not, you know, bother too much when things are too unexpected or disruptive.
Yeah.
And if you think about it, even like an expectation, another way to think about an expectation is it's a drawing, it's an image we have in our mind of what's to happen. So we have a drawing that we've already sketched, and when our drawing doesn't turn out to be the way we think it's going to be, people can be distressed by it, as opposed to, I like that, the ease of mind is that if it's like with these, what's so great about these is that I've never have any idea what's going to happen with them, and yet there's both something that repeats, that is similar, and there's things that are very different and unique each time. I just find it really cool.
Yeah, it is daunting to see the white page initially, but then if you just give it enough time for something to happen, then something happens. Oh no, what is that?
Yeah.
Ancient runes.
Oh yeah, it looks like ancient runes, or those drawings from the
Is this
Latin
a route
America,
into the future?
Latin America, those
Yeah.
it's not language, it's like icons, or
Yeah.
there's a name for that. I don't remember the name, but
Well, what's interesting is I was just talking with a friend of mine, and he's doing some work down in Australia, and he's working with the I don't know if it's the federal, local government, and he's working with a scientific body, and one of the things that they are doing is they're trying to they're hoping that they can have more dialogue between Aboriginal forms of knowledge and scientific forms of knowledge. And so that in itself sounds like a great idea. And he likes the idea. But he said, what's interesting is that he cannot get his colleagues to get past the fact is that in Australia, they've been there for thousands of years. The people there have a tradition of communication that is about dance, it's about storytelling, and sometimes it's around paintings and carving and stuff. They don't have manuscripts. They don't have the writing isn't. Yeah, they can write, but I mean they don't. That's not part of their culture for talking about what they know. And what he struggles with, he said, is that he can get people can get their head around the idea that there's other ways of knowing. They can't get past the fact is that why don't we just keep giving them PowerPoints and reports and things like that, and now we're equal. And he said, well, no. He said, we can speak how we want to speak, but that's not how they want to receive things. So we have to go beyond our predisposed ideas of manuscripts and this kind of way of doing science. And he said they're just not there. They're not there yet. They can get the idea that there's different ways of understanding, but they can't get that also affects what they want to do. So they're almost thinking like there's different ways of understanding about a manuscript instead of the manuscript itself is the issue, not the ideas contained within it. It's actually the actual format that doesn't work with them.
Yeah. I mean, we need to make languages, not to keep on trying to fit everything to the current vocabulary.
Yeah.
Well, visual expression has always been kind of a language, just that for whatever reasons it hasn't been used in business a lot.
Just before we continue, I just want to ask for everyone, we originally planned to stop at 30, and now we are at 37. Do you want to continue or take a break? I'm fine with the two options, but I feel like we are engaged in an interesting discussion, so I'm fine with if we want to continue until the next session, which is the personal story. What do you think? Fine with you to continue? Fine for you to continue? Yeah? Okay. Yeah.
Okay, I'll stop the recording if, as we discussed, for the story, right?
Yeah, we still have some few minutes left, but
okay.
Yeah, you can stop the recording if
we're now like unofficially on a break.
But I want to say about that, about vocabulary. Vocabulary and language and how we communicate with people. there's something really interesting happening in my company, for instance, where IT people expect that we can stick understanding to a clear definition of words. And as soon as we define well the words, everyone should use the same words to say the same things, Like they want the business to create a dictionary of the words they use and stick to the definition they made. And I replied so many times to them that it's nonsensical, You cannot expect them to do it. Even if they do create a dictionary's definition, the meaning of the words will change depending on who you talk to and which context they are and stuff like that. And they don't understand. And I think it's because of engineering type of thinking, because they have systems that speaks with words that doesn't mean anything else than what they are supposed to mean. It's like if then so do that. Right? And it's logical and procedural, but it's not the case for language. But they expect language to be the same, which is nuts. So ask your scientist that wants to blend knowledge, scientific knowledge, with indigenous knowledge is the same type of, in a way, it's the same type of a challenge than having IT people trying to discuss with business people. It's like they don't speak the same language. And on one side, there's guys who want things to be absolute, and I feel like is an issue. It's like, just look at scientific literature and see how people use the terminologies that you can find in some specific area of scientific knowledge. And you will find that just for that single word, you can find, so many different ways to explain it and so different ways to use it. And no one is bothered to create a dictionary with, fixed knowledge, understanding of what those words mean. But somehow, when we try to blend knowledge, sometimes some people expect it to be fixed and absolute, And I think this is where the gaps, tries to start to emerge, because you cannot blend knowledge if you are not willing to accept, diversity and in meaning and understanding. It's like one thing.
Yeah. Well, the thing that makes it such a challenge with language, though, is that there's also that also makes it extra difficult. Is that there's times where I'm trying to say something and you're not understanding me, but if I can find the right words, whether it's in another language or my own language, that you can understand, you can go, I understand what you're saying. But then there's the whole thing where we might be talking differently and at a fundamental level about what it is that we're talking about. Where that's the thing that's more difficult, in the sense is that I'm trying to tell you something that you're not able to hear. Like you don't, because it's just not what you understand. Like, it's not part of your world. And likewise, the same thing with me. Like, it's a case of where we think we're talking about the same thing, but we're not. Yeah. But because we only have the tool of language to be able to share that, it becomes this ability to even almost say, I don't know how to say I don't know what I don't know about this, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, because you don't know that you don't know about it. In fact, those kind of unknowns, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Yeah, that's funny, and I feel like it's part of the sensing the present, right? It's totally fit in the discussion, because we have access right now to things that we are not aware that we have access to, and that we are not aware that they are used, we can use them. And at the same time, when we try to formulate whatever we have in mind now, we do it in a partial way that might be understood, comprehended in a totally different way by someone else. Like when I said that it's like a virus, and you Diana, took this idea and make it more strong, or I don't know. You use your partial knowledge, and I use my partial knowledge of what I was trying to say, and we created something together that was totally different, but from what I really intended at the beginning of the discussion when I tried to formulate it, in this way, because I never thought like work as a virus. I thought just it looks like a virus, and you said it, and that makes sense. That made sense at the point when you said it, but. Yeah, that's really funny. Yeah.
But there's the power of language. It's creative. It's not absolute in the sense that, we got it in the biblical way that, God was the word. And you have to, it's remaining unchanged. No, it's forever changing, and you get these different types of languages. You get the if then, which are very functional and useful in IT. But you also get these metaphors and these dances from the Aborigines, and you get these stories that are from a different plane. And having all these put together, they don't have to, be reduced to universal language. It's just fine to have them as they are and just see the echo resounding. So I was listening yesterday to a podcast while chopping vegetables, and I'm trying to learn German, but I suck at it terribly. And my brother came to me and he was like, I'll help, and he was sitting next to me, and he started just trying to figure out what the German is about. And whenever he was getting like a common word, just like in English or in Romanian, like perspectives or reflection or something like that, that was, it was similar because it had the same basis. And he was like, oh, German is not so hard. And I'm like, now you put it together. And he was so excited about how things overlap, actually. It's like a different language. There are a lot of languages sharing so much meaning together. And we are making it very difficult to communicate, but languages are very beautiful and adaptive and cooperative. They communicate with each other more than we cooperate with it.
Yeah. When I tried to learn Russian, it was to me like experiencing an alien language to me, because it's so different to French or English, for instance. That's I never tried to really do it because it sounds too difficult to me. It's like from another planet to me. This is the feeling. I'm not saying it is, just saying that this is the feeling. In fact, yeah. But we are making it because I see it this way. I'm making it difficult. In fact, because it might be the case that if I approach it from another perspective, it might be easier. Yeah.
Now, if I was 20 years older, I'd know Russian.
You'll know Bulgarian, that's for sure. I don't know about Russian.
At least the alphabet.
Yes.
Fun fact, a bit of a historical side about Romania. So they were supposed to introduce the Cyrillic alphabet in the 1800s, but the Romanians all of a sudden woke up that they are patriots and they care about their Latin roots, and they wanted the Latin alphabet. So they started creating all these systems and talking about the value of Romanian, and they found documents, and they were really hard to explain how the Cyrillic alphabet is pulling us down. And there's this hot tension between languages and political tensions that kept on happening until Romanians are like, no, this is a language, and we wanted to make this choice because it was opening us to the Western world, whereas with Russian we would have just slowed down the progress. So it was a very intelligent shift. The fact that it's more flowery to think in Latin than in Russian. Russian has a depth, and it's very similar to the geography of the country. You've got the Siberian taiga and the tundra and the deserts, so it's got that impact on your spirit. Whereas you get the Western world with more clarity, with a lot of romanticism, but you've got the mountains and the very clogged up identity of the geography, from mountains, lakes to sea. So there's so much diversity in the European continent. which adopted the Latin vocabulary.
Yeah.
So yeah, that was a fun struggle of Romanians finding their identity and having to make this choice.
Yeah.
It's interesting that even ideas like most of us don't have a choice in at least our first language, because we're learning it. And it's always interesting when you hear people making a choice. We're saying, I'm going to choose to learn something. Particularly when they don't have to. Like when it's not like, you're thrown into it. Like, if you drop me into the middle of Mongolia and I had no way out, I'd learn Mongolian. I'd just learn it.
But talking about these languages, I think that actually the Eastern languages, starting with Russian and all the way further to this, are a little bit misunderstood because it almost like we trade speed, which comes with a lot of explicit vocabulary and explicit concepts, which is present on the West side. But on this side, there is so much flexibility of saying things without actually saying things, if you know what I mean.
Yeah.
Because of the way people think, and it's not always about you. And this is the other thing. What bothers me that with all the Latin and English specifically, there is always this subject, which is usually the one speaking. But and I'm from a Cyrillic background, so I would say ours, even though I don't speak fluently Russian, but I understand it good enough. It is not always about us; it's about other things, which I don't think it's well translated to the English and the Latin. So I actually feel like the Eastern do carry a lot of holistic aspects in it, which overcomplicates, of course, because you're never sure what the other person means, and you have to really have this deep relationship to understand the nuances of how they express themselves and what they mean. So it's not really a clear cut like in English. He has a dog. There is no ambiguity. Who is the subject and what the subject has. But on the other side, it's like it's almost like a drama.
This. I just realized I hated, learning English and having to use pronouns. We can use them, but we don't need them. It's like disposable. You can articulate. You do the accord with the object just on the word, maybe similar to French, but we can drop the subject altogether.
Yeah.
So this was really annoying. So I, we, us, them.
French is worse than English in that matter because we have to say if it's a she or he, and we have to precise for a table. For instance, it's not a table, it's la table. It's a she, and
we
that's
also
it.
have gender, Kevin.
Yes,
we have gender. Everything is gender. So
that's weird. Why?
Only
why
babies are like neutral.
No?
Because you can't quite tell what the baby is. So baby is it. Everything else is genderized.
Oh.
Isn't that interesting? Like in English, when I first started taking languages, I started taking French and stuff like this, and you're like, really? It seems so strange when you're not used to it. Like you're like, why is and why is the table feminine?
Yeah.
Did somebody come back and go, well, that's a very ladylike looking table. Let's call it a feminine.
Well, fun fact, in German, the word for girl is das Mädchen, which is neuter. So it's not even it's just like you position it in it basin. It's like, but it's a girl. But it's not a she.